Good evening, Rockville. Today is January 12th, 2026, and we're beginning meeting number 2-26. Please join me as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now move to agenda review. Ms. Judy Penny.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. There are no changes to this evening's agenda.
Thank you. We'll now have the city manager's report.
Mayor Ashton, members of City Council, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I have some good news to start off with. A while ago, City Council decided to create a city employee first-time home buyers program. That's a wonderful program thought up by the council. Have a number of different financial incentives and education as part of that program. And the goal really is to provide city employees with an incentive to live within the city limits, but more importantly, to have safe, stable housing as their employee for the city. And today we had our first ever closing. So it's official. Really excited about that. And even better, we have 5 more closings lined up over the next month and a half. So congratulations to everybody involved, especially the city council. Second, just so you know, and I warned you guys about this, now we are building the budget. So I'm spending hours and hours and hours with staff in this room, going through all of our programs, policies, et cetera, doing the best we can to formulate a recommended budget for this council to consider later on this year. It's hard work, but it's exciting work because, again, as we all say, if you want to know a community's values, look at its budget. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And I had a chance to engage with some seniors, and they reminded us that not everyone can join or take the survey online, so we can mail copies of the survey. So please feel free to call City Hall if you would like one. We will send one your way. Thank you. All right, we next have board and commission appointments. We have a few today. The first is the Human Rights Commission, and we also have a Planning Commission appointment. Who would like to make the motion for the human rights? Ms. Shaw, Councilmember Shaw.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the new appointment to the Human Rights Commission of Magna Brown to serve in an expiring 3-year term until November 1st, 2028.
Excellent. Thank you. Do we have a second? Councilmember Valeri seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And she is here today. Please stand. Thank you. Thank you for your service. All right. We'll now move on to the Planning Commission. Councilmember Valeri.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the reappointment to the Planning Commission of Jamie Espinoza to serve a new 5-year term until February 1st, 2031.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Fulton seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We have unanimously approved both appointments. Thank you very much for your service. We will now move over to Community Forum. This is a time for us to hear the ideas, needs, and concerns of our community. All persons shall address the mayor and council in a civil and courteous manner and be respectful to each other as well. Each person is allowed 3 minutes, and we ask that you stick to the 3 minutes allowed. There is a time clock in front of you. You will hear an audible beep at the end of your 3 minutes. Please state your name and if you live in the city of Rockville for the record. The first person we have is Ibo Alush. Welcome.
Hi, City Council. Hi, Mayor. My name is Ibo. I'm with Rank Chairs Voting, and today I'm here to talk about inviting you all for RCV Day. We're going to be next January 23rd from 4 to 6 in Ward of Beer across the street right here. We're going to be for a happy hour to celebrate Rank Chairs Voting, what we did over the last year. And I want to talk also about the RCV legislation of General Assembly. RCV will sending a sign-on letter to the mayor and council to support the county in building the bill. I'm so sorry. I'm nervous. I don't know why.
That's okay. Please take your time.
Thank you so much. And I'm not a resident. I should be answered this question from the beginning. Thank you so much. That's all what I have.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony. Welcome, Dhruva Diego Kumar.
My time. Okay, Dhruva Diego Kumar. Now, I don't want to do the same intro in the new year about this presiding leading, so I will change it a little bit, and I'll say thank you for this Open Democracy Forum, this opportunity. Now, my method, my disposition, a little bit different, don't mind. We're in a new century, so a little bit different how I look compared to other people. Now, as mentioned, possible candidate from Montgomery County, Maryland Government Council at large or United States House of Rep Congress, my talents, skills, education, all subjects, experience, better for my home nation, USA, in Congress. So I'm leaning towards that. I already have a plan to bring over $20 billion to this county, $20 billion. I can work both sides like that. Now, my preamble, pledge allegiance to British America, USA America, rule of law, rule of law. Now, I do not pledge allegiance to already seceded Montgomery County Council for decades with the Tacoma, Thrace, Cinco, 65%, Ocho, 80%, to be usurpers of all our resources, and this idiocy, abusive, juvenile, cut and paste, Montgomery manufacturer, blub-a-dub, child's play, Montgomery County, Maryland Government Council that is only for Latin American, Central American illegals and undocumented, leaving so many behind. Now, it's a new year. I have a new message. I want to charge you all, the county and the city, because we need to refrain from using this illegal undocumented term. I use it in context. It's not a kinder, gentler term. Now, because they've been contributing here for decades, they've established themselves, so I want to categorize this as established themselves. I mentioned before the mental health problem with the young when we use these terms. My demarcation in terms of really enforcing our illegal undocumented border issues is as of the second presidency. Prior to this, I would do a sophisticated analysis. Now, I want to repeat again my I don't know, a lot of time, there's so many things. I've discussed you setting up a task force. This is the reason why, because I don't get enough time. This is for safety. And also I need strategy for against harassment, stalking, taunting. So I've requested this many times and I'm requesting again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That exhausts the list of those who have signed up in advance. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay. I want to call my colleagues' attention to the fact that there are written comments that were submitted to Mayor and Council. We have a list in our reference guide, and I know that some have come through after that. We'll now move on to a consent agenda. We have a few items to review. One is award a contract in the form of a purchase order on the 72-Hour LLC, which is the National Auto Fleet Group of Waitensville, California, for the purchase of one Freightliner in the amount of about $300K, consistent with the terms and cooperative purchase Sourcewell contract. We have the FY 2025 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, which also includes an independent auditor report, and the FY 25 Popular Annual Financial Report. Item C is the approval of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Rockville and the Montgomery County Board of Elections for them to use our drop box located at City Hall. Those are the three agenda items. Would anyone like to pull any? Okay, and then before we move forward, I just wanted to give the city manager a time to share a quick update because we do have the Popular Annual Financial Report. We talked about this in the Leadership Planning Team meeting this morning. It is something that gives a status update on the city's finances, and it's something that the staff has done a wonderful job. I encourage you to take a look at it online as well. Mr. Mihalik.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. Just so people know what's on the agenda tonight, it's really the annual comprehensive financial report, also known as the ACFR, and also the PAFR, which is the popular annual financial report. City has a financial policy that on an annualized basis, again, every single year, we hire an independent auditing firm to go through our financial statements to make sure they're in good order. And those are the two documents that are before the council this evening. The good news is our financial position is very strong, and we do follow all policies. Specifically, there are no significant financial issues of concern, and there were no identified material weaknesses. All government funds ended the year with positive fund balances, and all government funds were within the mayor and council's adopted policy guidelines. All the enterprise funds, except the parking fund, had positive net positions as of June 30th, 2025. The parking fund, as you know, is carrying some debt service for the original construction of the parking structures. It'll remain that way until that debt service is retired. All the enterprise funds had a positive cash flow. If anybody's interested in looking at those reports in detail, they are uploaded online at rockvillemd.gov, financial reports. Happy to answer any questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? And thank you for that report. Okay. I would also note that one other important thing that we get is we did not raise taxes. We haven't raised them in a while. And also in the report, you note that we have adequate amount of, or exceed the amount for the reserve funds.
Those are both correct, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions? Great. I just want to see if we have a motion to approve all of the consent agenda items. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve consent agenda items A, B, and C.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councilmember Shaw seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. And I'll end with a huge thank you to our finance team as well as our procurement team for all the consent agenda items and for keeping our city on track budgetarily. We have an action item for today, 11A, potential adoption of an ordinance to amend Chapter 10.5 of the Rockville City Code entitled Forest and Tree Preservation to bring the chapter into conformance with the current state law and make various modifications to improve the administration of the chapter. While you're setting up, I just want to introduce Anthony Mazza as well as Sean Ryan, and we also have panelists Craig Simoneau, Don Foreman, Nick Dumais, Steve Mader, Paul Perez, and Erica Eakins. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm excited to be back with the body this evening to present this for you. All right, so good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm Sean Ryan with CPDS. I'm pleased to be with you this evening, as I said, to present to you the proposed amendments to Chapter 10.5 of the Forest and Tree Preservation Ordinance, also known as the FTPO, for your consideration. All right, so just a brief outline for the body. During the presentation, I will discuss staff's suggested motion for your consideration. I'll provide some brief background on this effort, a timeline of key milestones in 2025, the latest amendments to the FTPO, as well as in proposed next steps. So first off, staff's suggested motion is that the mayor and council move to adopt the ordinance at attachment 1 of the staff report to amend Chapter 10.5 of the Rockville City Code entitled the Forest and Tree Preservation Ordinance. All right, so just some brief background. I know it's been a little bit of time since I've been before the body with this item. So I'd just like to give you a quick refresher on the background regarding these amendments. The original impetus for making amendments to the FTPO began when the state of Maryland passed Senate Bill 526, the Forest Preservation and Retention Act in 2023. Updating the FTPO to reflect the new requirements in Senate Bill 526 presented a unique opportunity to make additional updates at the recommendation of the public, mayor and council, and staff. Staff originally introduced amendments to the FTPO to mayor and council in May 2024. This was followed by a public hearing on August 2024, and in September 2024, staff heard discussion and instructions from the mayor and council, which primarily focused on a series of additional recommended amendments to the FTPO from the mayor and council, which will be discussed shortly. All right, so I'd like to provide a timeline of all the events that took place in 2025. As I said, with the last public hearing taking place on September 30th, 2024, I would like to take you through this timeline of events that occurred behind the scenes during the last year. Following the September meeting with the mayor and council, staff was tasked with submitting the proposed amendments to the state of Maryland Department, Maryland Department of Natural Resources, also referred to as MDNR, for review. To support jurisdictions across the state in meeting compliance, MDNR requested that jurisdictions not submit their amended ordinances until after MDNR had released their updated forestry technical manual as well as their draft model ordinance. The technical manual was released in early 2025, and the draft model ordinance was released May 23rd, 2025. After reviewing MDNR's manual and draft ordinance, staff submitted the FTPO amendments to MDNR for review on June 20th, 2025. Staff then received comments from MDNR on the proposed amendments on September 29th, 2025. The comments were generally minor in nature, and they can all be found in the staff report in their entirety. Staff resubmitted the amended FTPO addressing MDNR's comments 1 month later on October 20th, 2025. And 4 days later, in late October, MDNR confirmed that the proposed ordinance adequately addressed their comments and complied with state law. All right, so now I'd like to go over the changes that were made at the direction of the mayor and council at the last meeting in September. And this slide, it does showcase all of those changes. However, the first change I will note is the single substantial comment that was provided by MDNR to staff regarding an offsite planting requirement. And the additional 6 amendments are recommendations that were made from mayor and council to staff during the September meeting, as I said. So first off, offsite planting. Under state law, offsite planting is a permitted option for mitigating forest removal, and it was not included in the original FTPO amendments. So staff have added offsite planting to the mitigation options, and we have also defined offsite planting, or offsite specifically, in the FTPO, which includes properties that are not located on the application site, but are, however, located within City of Rockville limits. So providing an example of offsite planting and how it could be utilized, I think might be helpful here. So hypothetically, a developer could come in who may wish to remove a certain amount of forest for a proposed development. The developer may not have adequate space on the subject property for reforestation. With the offsite planting provision, the developer could secure the rights to reforest an offsite property that's within city limits. Now, that property would still be subject to a forest conservation plan and all of the protections associated with it, such as a forest conservation easement and a warranty and maintenance agreement. All right, so next up, the mayor and council was interested in instituting a native species requirement. And that was also echoed by public comments that we'd received on the FTPO as well. So that being said, I will state that going back and reviewing the mayor and council's previous discussions on it, the mayor and council had explored numerous percentages, generally ranging from 70 to 80% for the native species requirement. Based on that feedback, we're very pleased to announce that we have revised the draft to include that at least 80% of trees planted to meet forest conservation requirements must be native species. Now, further dwelling a little bit further into that, in order to do that, incorporating a native species requirement necessitates a definition of native species. So collaborating with the city forester and the city horticulturalist in Recreation and Parks Department, staff proposed a native tree list that would be bound to the Mid-Atlantic region. which is standardized in the field of forestry. And that list will be drawn from scientific sources such as Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Maryland Department of Agriculture, and iNaturalist. All right, so moving on next here, encouraging biodiversity. The Mayor and Council did note at the previous meeting in September, in the context of the proposed native tree species requirement, that biodiversity is an important consideration that adds value to the city landscape. While it wasn't specifically required by the Mayor and Council to include a biodiversity requirement, staff appreciated the value of those comments, and to that end incorporated language requiring plantings to be met using a diversity of tree species to the extent possible. This will ensure that plantings provide for biodiversity to promote resilience and ecological integrity. All right, and forestry official. So Mayor and Council recommended that we replace the term code administrator with a term that reflects the expertise required of those who administer the FTPO. Staff determined that forestry official is an appropriate designation and has further defined the term in the FTPO to mandate a qualified professional. Under the Forest Conservation Act, a qualified professional is an individual who's permitted to prepare forest stand delineations and forest conservation plans. Certification as a qualified professional requires prescribed educational and work experience in addition to an MDNR approved forest conservation course. All right, so next up, we have the public notice extension. The Mayor and Council recommended that we extend the required number of days for staff to post a public notice prior to the removal of a priority retention forest or portion thereof. Staff did extend the public notice requirement from the original 20 days, which is mandated in state law, to 30 days as requested by the Mayor and Council. I will also note that we did receive some feedback earlier today via email that was requesting that the notice also include the posting of signage on the subject property as well as online notification. Currently, the FTPO requires mailed notice to adjacent and adjoining property owners. However, I would like to say that I do believe that it would be possible to also require signage as well as online posting further along in the Forest Conservation Manual, which is to come after, of course. All right, and lastly, we have the cemetery, the consideration of a cemetery exemption. The Mayor and Council asked us to investigate whether an FTPO exemption for cemeteries is feasible. Staff evaluated in conjunction with MDNR and the City Attorney's Office. It was determined that under state law, an exemption for cemeteries does not exist. However, staff notes that the new amendment for off-site planting does provide an option for cemeteries that may have limited space to remove forest cover and still comply with the FTPO. So we think that would be a viable option. All right. So now I'd like to briefly go over the next steps, staff's next steps following the possible approval of the proposed ordinance. So first off, the amended FTPO would go into effect immediately upon possible adoption. Second, we would publicize the amendments to the FTPO through the city website, Rockville reports, as well as an email blast to all recent applicants and known industry professionals. And whatever other practical means we can find for advertising. Finally, staff would begin updating the Forest Conservation Manual to reflect changes made to the FTPO immediately upon adoption. The Forest Conservation Manual is a supplemental technical manual that serves to administer the requirements of the FTPO. Under the current amendments, changes to the Forest Conservation Manual would be made with administrative approval. All right, and then just circling back, staff's suggested motion for the Mayor and Council would be to adopt the ordinance at attachment 1 of the staff report to amend Chapter 10.5 of the Rockville City Code entitled Forest and Tree Preservation Ordinance. And with that being said, that concludes my presentation, and very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. I also want to particularly point out the summary of what you heard from Mayor and Council and what was implemented versus what you had trouble with, given the compliance needs with the state. So I think that was very well articulated and appreciated. I just want to open up the floor and see if my colleagues have any questions. I am going down the line. Okay. Dr. Miles, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just echoing your comments to staff for all the great work, and thanks for incorporating the feedback, particularly regarding adding a little more heft to the title of the person who will be overseeing some of the changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulton.
Thank you for this. Also, great presentation. One question, and I'm not sure if it's more for the lawyers or you, that to the extent possible, forest conservation requirements should be met using a diversity of tree species. Like, when is it not possible? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of like what that phrase does for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So I think that the extent possible is, it really varies in the sense that, to what degree. We did some research into other municipalities and if and when biodiversity is required and how exactly you implement that. And that's where some of the challenges come in, is how exactly do you implement it? Some other locations will have certain requirements prescribing certain number of species, but we thought that this language would provide flexibility. And frankly, in the forest conservation plans that I've seen, there has not been an issue achieving biodiversity. That's something that developers and staff are always on the same page about. Developers want to have biodiversity in the community as well, because of course it helps them achieve their end goals as well. So I will say that I don't really think that it is not possible to achieve biodiversity, and I'm very confident that we'll be able to continue doing that, even with the language structured as it is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that I want absolutes or specific. I like the language. You answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Valeri.
Thank you. Hello. One of my favorite topics. Sorry, that was not one of my questions. So I have a couple questions, and I will pass it along to my colleague. And yes, thank you for all of the amazing work on this. I know it's been a long process. Can you share, as I was looking at, as I was going through the redlined version and looking and comparing it to the documents that it referenced, can you share, because I couldn't find it where in the Forest Conservation Manual is the definition of native trees as is referenced in the draft ordinance?
So the Forest Conservation Manual is not in the packet. Just to be clear, the Forest Conservation Manual has not yet been updated to reflect what's in Chapter 10.5 of the City Code.
Yep. No, I'm well aware. I pulled it from the forestry webpage. On folks haven't checked out the newly redesigned website is awesome. But in the draft ordinance, under the definitions, it refers to, if you give me 1 second, even with all my Post-its still, under definitions, native tree means a tree native to the Mid-Atlantic region as identified in the Forest Conservation Manual. So then I looked at the Forest Conservation Manual and I didn't see it there, and I was just thinking maybe I missed it. Is there a definition of native trees as currently written in the current Forest Conservation Manual?
No, and I appreciate the question because we have not yet updated the manual to reflect these changes in 10.5. So the intent here and what will happen is that the manual will be updated to include that.
Okay, and that's extremely helpful because I was sitting there flipping back and forth and I thought I missed something, but.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Did the Environment Commission review the draft ordinance at any point in this process?
Yes, we did do a presentation for the Environment Commission. The details of that are in the staff report. However, as I recall, I'm trying to remember exactly how the presentation covered all of the proposed changes and everything, and we did receive comments and feedback from the Environment Commission, which we then took as we were further drafting the ordinance. I don't believe they specifically had a redlined version. I think it was more of a presentation style.
Yeah, no, it just makes sense. And maybe I missed it as an attachment, but I didn't see it attached to this agenda item. And maybe it was attached to the previous agenda item where we had this discussion. But I'm always a big fan of hearing from the commissions that are, since they are advisory, and that are closest to this issue. And then my final question of this round, Madam Mayor. In thinking through the offsite planting requirements and other things when it's just not feasible due to the amount of area, is there some way that we could take that back? We have 80% in native plants in this, which is phenomenal. I'm a big fan. Not surprising to you, I'm sure. Do you believe that we could consider possible incentives if someone chooses to go above the 80% threshold to utilizing 100% native trees?
I think that in terms of incentives, if there were going to be incentives, it would have to come with concessions to the tree requirements. And to be clear, they could only be concessions to the city-specific requirements. We can't be less strict in any way than the state. So they would have to be in the form of concessions to the city-specific requirements, which staff was, we're trying to get the maximum amount of forest cover back on these sites possible. That's really our goal. And that's largely what we've heard from the community and the mayor and council as well. So it wasn't something that we really explored just because we didn't want to make those concessions to the tree canopy.
Sure, and I completely appreciate that. I guess I was looking at more of a positive rather than a negative pulling away. So in some way, you incentivize by saying, hey, if you go even further, then these are some awesome things that here are the prizes you can get. No, okay, those are all my questions this round. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will just note that I support an incentive if it helps to do something like maybe there's a lower fee if you do 100% native or something. We have done incentive programs before, and if we're trying to get more native, I support it. So just wanted to comment on that.
If it's okay, council, let us roll this out and talk to the users. And if over time they come up with a great idea on incentive, we'll bring it back to council if that's okay.
Excellent, thank you. And I know that's a separate issue because we're going to go through fees and all other kind of things, but I just wanted to be on the record for that. In terms of the forest conservation plan, I do recognize that there's two documents and we're approving one that references the other, but the other one's not updated yet. Would you be giving us a summary of those changes? Because you're also wanting to take the authority from mayor and council to the city manager, and because it is a technical document, which I understand, but I would just want to make sure that we're getting a summary of those changes, and we can actually include that the mayor and council would get a summary of change in the code, as we've done for other items like this.
Sure. So I think we could provide a summary of changes, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. There's some, I was looking at the one from 2009, and the reason why I raised it is because sometimes there's a public process to this, right? And we got some really good feedback from the community, and it helped make this better. So I was just thinking the opportunities to be able to see what's going on so that maybe we're hearing from the Environment Commission or someone that will help make something better. Not that we're going to dig into the technical, but I really like that we have made this better through the public process. Okay. And then the other question I have is the warranty and maintenance agreement. Do we have an active way that we manage warranty and maintenance agreements to check on that people are fulfilling that requirement?
Yes, absolutely. We have a full-time forestry inspector who is out in the field all day, every day, 5 days a week. And specifically with warranty and maintenance agreements, we do require 2 inspections per year. And if the sites are in compliance, then they move on to the next inspection. However, if they're not in compliance, then they do have to make corrections to return to compliance with their approved forest conservation plan, and then a reinspection occurs. And that the warranty and maintenance period is in effect for the full 5-year duration. So that would be at an absolute minimum 10 inspections over those 5 years if nothing was wrong, hypothetically. And then after the 5-year warranty and maintenance period is concluded, the site is still bound to remain in compliance with the Forest Conservation Plan in perpetuity under the terms of the Forest Conservation easement that runs with the land.
Okay, thank you. And the next comment relates to the native species and biodiversity. I really think this is one of the areas that this has been strengthened quite remarkably, and I'm very proud of Rockville for putting this forward, given that we're a tree city. A resident asked me, and I wanted to confirm, does native species also include native cultivars as written in this document?
Yes, the intent is that it will.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Do we have to spell that out, or is it implied?
I don't believe we have to spell that out. I think that the way that we've written the language is that we will be able to further articulate that in the manual.
Okay. And then on the comment of biodiversity, this is something that the mayor and council did raise at the last session. And some of us have heard in particular neighborhoods when a board gets through on, it has been mostly street trees, that it kind of really wipes out, a whole bunch of trees because there's not enough biodiversity. And I know we're focused on this part, but I did want to raise for the record, if we're telling the public when you develop new things that you're going to have biodiversity and native species at 80%, I just wanted to see that we as a city would be also following those rules when it comes to planting in our parks and on street trees as well. And just want to go on record that I'd want to see that come back to the mayor and council. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. First, let me just say this is excellent work, and I really appreciate the way that you took our comments and amendments and kind of incorporated them into the final document, especially the comments of the residents. I think that you went above and beyond what is required, and I think that Rockville really has something to be proud of there. I just want to ask one little question, and maybe it's just my confusion. Section 10.5-13D3E. It talks about adherence to items of the Forest Conservation Manual may be in conflict with state law, and it says, and maybe this question is for the city attorney's office as well. Then it says, legal counsel should be sought regarding this requirement. And then the next part just kind of confuses me. Like we did the analysis and maybe it wasn't in compliance with state law, but we're going to deal with it later. I'm just trying to get my head around what was meant by the paragraph.
Yeah, absolutely. I can provide some background on that. So I believe what you're referring to is that MDNR provided a comment on code section 10.5-13.D.3.E. And they were concerned that requiring adherence to items in the Forest Conservation Manual could potentially be in conflict with state law to the extent that the Forest Conservation Manual could prescribe something outside of the context of what Chapter 10.5 has done. And that could potentially be in conflict with state law. However, that's after discussing that with the city attorney's office, we determined, that the Forest Conservation Manual has never been anything other than a supplemental document that basically articulates exactly how to go about facilitating Chapter 10.5. It does not in any way create any policy outside of what is strictly prescribed in Chapter 10.5. So after discussion with city's attorney's office, we understand and we appreciate the comment from MDNR, but we're also incredibly confident that that is impossible, that the Forest Conservation Manual would do anything that would be in conflict with state law.
Councilmember Shaw.
I wanted to echo my colleagues and thank you for working on this and listening to the community as well as the elected body on this. I did have a few questions around the equity impact statement. And while it's good to recognize the societal benefits with tree coverage, the statement itself is not clear on the actual impact. The tree coverage throughout the city, although is good, there are some neighborhoods that don't have the same type of tree coverage as other neighborhoods. So I think within the equity statement, calling out some of those neighborhoods that would have a disproportionate benefit with this would be really helpful in understanding the overall equity impact. Especially knowing that the tree coverage leads to things like better health. The lack of tree coverage can contribute to respiratory issues, and so I think it's really important to just have a little bit more detail with the equity statement, just so we can understand and measure the good work that we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Van Grack.
Of course, echoing my colleagues, fantastic job. And I know that you have been doing an excellent job of working with the Environmental Commission. And so I appreciate that. But with regard to their feedback, I know that you answered this beautifully during the meeting last week, but I just want to clarify to the extent anybody in the public might have a similar question. I know that we've got, and Councilmember Valeri talked about the 80% native tree requirement. Can you describe the reason for not doing 100 or not doing a lower to 50?
Sure, absolutely. And we did research with what other jurisdictions are doing, and we wanted to be aspirational with our goals. So I think we set our sights, at a good mark at 80%. But ultimately, having it set at 80% does provide us with some flexibility. The truth of the matter is that Rockville is an urban jungle, and we have a lot of locations that have very harsh conditions for trees, trees that may not have been specifically, weren't specifically created, so to speak, to thrive in those conditions necessarily. So that 20% does give us the flexibility to utilize non-native tree species, but absolutely not invasive. I want to make that very clear. No invasive trees are planted, but non-native trees in some situations could be planted in very harsh environments. For example, street trees in some scenarios. We don't always get the widest tree lawns that we'd like to see. We don't always have the soil space. So in those conditions, sometimes the tree that's going to be best suited might not be a tree that would be considered native to Maryland, but once again, absolutely not invasive.
And I know this was discussed in the Environment Commission, but I presume that to the extent that either through other research or in the city's own evaluation, should a native but deemed non-invasive species be deemed having concern in Rockville, we can take one of those species that we've deemed native and non-invasive and put it into an invasive species category to the extent we see a problem in Rockville, right?
Yes, the language in the code does give us the flexibility if we identify trees that have specific issues, even if they're not considered to be invasive, that we can include those within the list that would be kept in association with the Forest Conservation Manual as trees that wouldn't be planted. An example could be a tree that might have issues with certain pests or things of that, like emerald ash borer and ash trees, things like that. We have other trees that we know have issues with, limb breakages or things like that. They may have poor structure. So we do absolutely have that ability, and we'll make sure to utilize that.
So it's for all these reasons that I really want to, again, express my congratulations on a great job. Not only incorporating our feedback, such as with biodiversity, native, non-native, invasive, non-invasive species, it's really an all-encompassing job that you all did and should be commended. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Valeri.
See, I'm adhering already to trying this out. So I have 3 more questions, but I'll be quick on this. It's referred to specifically in the memo attached to the agenda item on the pros and cons of native versus non-native. Next up I know that you mentioned updating the forest conservation manual. After that, were we slated to then update the street tree master plan?
We're not at this time. I mean, they're separate discussions, separate parts of the code, but we can certainly do that.
I would love to see the pros and cons of updating that. I think that that would be beneficial if we're doing the work here. It kind of makes sense to me. Sorry, I'll stick to questions, not commentary. So in determining, I want to say that I completely agree with you and the feedback on signage during the notice period. I think that is just fantastic. I think it's going to be really helpful. For off-site plantings, which give me a little bit of heartburn in general because it's not always the highest quality. Could there be, instead of fee in lieu, a consideration for things such as green roofs? In particular, what's coming to mind is the pollinator garden that is on top of the Milton at Twinbrook Quarter.
That's a great question, Councilmember Valeri. I believe that green roofs, specifically, if they're able to meet the requirements under Chapter 10.5, such as long-term preservation, forest conservation easement, things of that nature, they're not prohibited from receiving credit for trees planted on them. What I will say about green roofs is oftentimes they're also doubling as stormwater management features, which means they very well could have easements associated with stormwater management. And in those scenarios, they wouldn't also be able to encumber it with a forest conservation easement because those two things are opposed. But to the extent that that situation would not be occurring, there's nothing that I'm aware of in Chapter 10.5 that would prohibit crediting trees on green roofs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I had a question about smaller home areas. We've seen with some of the established neighborhoods, the older neighborhoods have bigger lots, and there are 3 trees, for example. And I think it was a previous discussion that Dr. Miles has shared that in some of the smaller communities, they're putting trees up right against a home and then the roots go into the foundation. I was just curious, how are you considering with the 3 tree requirement for a smaller, or is it based on, have you thought about going based on square footage of lots without also incentivizing developers to just create a bunch of small lots? I was curious with that balance of getting more trees, but also considering that several of the lot sizes are much smaller now.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that question. So we would be looking to develop the same framework that exists in the subdivision regulations as it relates to lot trees. We do require in the subdivision regulations 1 lot tree per 2,000 square feet of lot or fraction thereof. And as 10.5 is currently written, we're going to be basically further articulating those requirements for those single detached residential lots in the Forest Conservation Manual. And that would be completed via a tree save plan. And I believe that we would be looking to institute those same thresholds because we do have, like you said, we have circumstances where we have lots that are too small to accommodate 3 large shade trees, and it can become a nuisance or a hazard to the property or to adjacent properties. So we would be looking to basically implement that same requirement. And that can be one of the things that we certainly provide an update to the body on with the list of Forest Conservation Manual updates that we previously discussed.
That's very helpful. And when tree removal is done, we don't count invasive trees, right? We actually want people to remove invasive trees.
That's correct. And we do not count invasive trees. And we can further articulate that in the manual as well, just to clarify that point.
I think that will be helpful because that has come up before. And so just to make clarity for future staff members of what's intended. And I just wanted to make a comment. I do appreciate your comments on the green roofs. as well. There was one other issue that came up previously, which is new developments where someone has a whole slot of land and then part of the land is dedicated for public streets. It's my understanding that you're going to reduce the square footage so that there are and some getting credit for the trees that are planted on those public streets, or how are you handling that? Because that has come up with one property in King Farm, actually, where they were like, why can't I get credit for the trees that we're putting in the public street that we are donating or giving to the city as part of the public street creation? Have we sufficiently handled that complaint?
Yes, you are allowed to receive credit for trees on a forest conservation plan that are planted in a public right-of-way or a street that is going to be dedicated as public right-of-way, so long as it meets some minimum spacing requirements for the tree. And you are allowed to receive credit, I believe, for up to 25% of your overall forest conservation requirements for street trees.
Okay. And then in terms of the equity comments regarding tree coverage, is it my understanding that there is some less tree planting requirement with affordable units as well as like with less parking requirements? I know it's another division, but it's that balance of trying to make housing, the math work for housing to make it more affordable, but also we want to have clean air and tree canopy all over the city.
There's not, to my knowledge, there's not a specific reduction in 10.5 for affordable housing projects. What there is, under Senate Bill 526, the state identified priority funding areas, which the city of Rockville is in a priority funding area in its entirety. So essentially, the reforestation requirements are slightly reduced in a priority funding area. Outside of a priority funding area, it's a 1-to-1 requirement. Inside of a priority funding area, such as the city, it's for every 1 acre removed, then you have to plant back half an acre of forest. So I think that is the intent with that provision, that allowance is to meet exactly what you were mentioning. And I will also note, just for the body, that the city, in our ordinance, we have a higher reforestation requirement for properties that are clearing below the forest conservation threshold. And that's actually set at 3-to-1. But for clearing above the forest conservation threshold, it is 0.5-to-1 as identified in the state law for priority funding areas.
Okay, I just thought that we might, something to monitor, right, that we don't, and maybe it's like if the city's planting more in those areas, to try to make sure that even in priority funding areas that we're getting tree canopy for all of our residents. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Valeri.
I was waiting for the appropriate comment time period. No, you can tell, and I know Mr. Ryan knows, I love this topic a whole lot. And it's part of the reason that my family and I moved to where we did, was because we do love trees and we do love that part of Rockville. Tree City USA is definitely not just a slogan or a couple of signs. It is pretty foundational to what draws a lot of people to live here. And I've definitely seen firsthand, and Mr. Ryan probably remembers this, what happens when the county maybe doesn't follow all the steps in their own forest and tree preservation ordinance. Then you see a development over a champion tree. And then got to roll it all back. And that would be the crabapple tree on our den. So it's really important. And, a lot of future headaches can be resolved with a well-formed, tight ordinance. I think that's where I am very challenged on merely, everything is very, very tight in this draft, except for when we get to the definition of native plants and native trees, rather. Because it's interesting on the page where you define native trees, meaning a tree native to the mid-Atlantic region, technically accurate, not specific enough, it should be my context. Then the next page, we actually defer to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. Well, it's the EPA that created the ecoregions that would give us the specificity so that, you know, a lot of people think New Jersey is the Mid-Atlantic, great and all, but there's also, you know, on the shore, New Jersey, there's on the shore, Maryland. We're not, those are not native and will not thrive as well as Northern Piedmont will here. So I really, I'm kind of surprised by that lack of specificity, and I would really want, I would urge us to do that, and if it needs to be defined in the newly revised forest conservation manual, I'm totally cool with that. But I think merely saying the Mid-Atlantic is extremely ambiguous, nebulous. As someone who grew up in Maryland, and I say I'm from the Mid-Atlantic, they don't know what state I'm from, you know? So I think we can get a little bit more specific there. I'll try to go through these quickly. There is another section, actually, section 10.5 23B8. Use native plant materials. Again, if we're going to have a definition of native plants, we'll need to put a cross-reference there to however we're going to define it. That's why I think we do need to be really thoughtful about it too. I mean, there is definitely state law we have to follow, but I think that what you hear from what you're hearing from me, you heard from the community, is that we can always do better than the bare minimum. And I think that the 80% is a great way to go. I will say that I do, and I'm always happy to have an offline conversation on some of this. There are some points in the memo that was attached, definitely don't agree with. And I'm always happy to talk about urban tree canopy because actually in New York City, 80% of the tree stands are actually native to New York City. So I think it's possible. And I think I would love to delve a little deeper into perhaps the reticence to invest more in that, because I think in the long term, we will not have the problems. I know you mentioned pests. I know you mentioned loss of limbs, where that can happen to any tree. It's not specific to native trees, but, and I'll pick on Councilmember Jackson a little bit with this one. I think a great example of the difference in what native trees can do in a very practical way was when the spotted lanternfly joined us in this area. And for anybody who was wandering around outside while the spotted lanternflies were doing their thing, I was up in King Farm getting coffee, and spotted lanternflies everywhere, just crawling everywhere. I can tell you, I saw 2 spotted lanternflies in Twinbrook, and we have a lot more native trees. That's my anecdote for the moment. But when you invest in that, then you are investing in breaking down the little tunnel we were giving the spotted lanternflies. I think that in general, this is really solid, and I am appreciative of the level of work in this. My last comment. In section 10.5-4, 3, D as in dog. I think that this was the distillation of in my head. I don't think that the language after this list must not include any native tree, from that point to the end of that sentence, is superfluous. If I could say, it's a little prejudicial in terms of making value judgments on native trees that can very easily and more easily be made on non-native trees. So I just want to be sure that I read the pros and cons. Definitely a difference of opinion for me. But you know, I am the Lorax on the dais, so I am always happy to speak for the trees. But Mr. Ryan, I have always appreciated the work that you do. in terms of the trees, and you and I have definitely geeked out a lot around this topic. So thank you, and I hope that my feedback is taken in a positive and constructive way, because I think our goals are at the end the same. Thank you.
I just want to thank you again for this fantastic report. One question. We had a lot of folks from the cemetery come last time, and you gave some really good reasons as what the state said about that. Just want to clarify, we circled back with that organization. Is that correct? Just to let them know where things landed?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we have asked our questions and provided thorough comments. I heard everyone say thank you for a well-done report. Thank you for working with the state to get their feedback. Thank you for working with our commissions, our community, and us. I think this is a very solid draft. I know that the work is not done, that you still have the manual to do next, so good luck on that. As we move forward, you will be amenable to adding the just amendment to say that we'll get a summary to mayor and council, correct?
You want it amended in the code tonight, or you just want us to make sure
Just
we
to
send it
note
to
that
you?
it's written in the final code, that a summary, just so future mayor and councils and staff know that.
In
You've
this-
done that before. When you remove authority, you just say, we'll send an update to mayor and council.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, and then our city attorney has shared with us that we did introduce this in the past, so we don't technically have to introduce, but there have been substantive changes, so I think it would be a good idea if you recommend, Mr. City Attorney, for us to reintroduce this new version.
Well, you can either reintroduce, or you could simply amend the originally introduced ordinance. So the way the code works is, once an ordinance has been introduced, there's a layover for at least a week unless the body votes to waive the layover. And once it comes back to the body, under the charter, the body will either discuss the introduced ordinance, amend the introduced ordinance, or take final action on an introduced ordinance. In this case, since the ordinance that was introduced a year and a half ago has changed, the body could simply note that the final action is the ordinance that's attached, including the amendments that's been made. Or you can simply just reintroduce, waive, and adopt what's before you.
Thank you.
So
What is your recommendation between those two options?
I think you could just simply acknowledge that you're adopting an ordinance that's been amended since the original ordinance was introduced.
Okay, great. So when we say we move to adopt, we're going to move to adopt the amended ordinance that was introduced at attachment 1 with the amendment to include an update to mayor and council. Okay, all right. Who wants to make the motion? Councilmember, I'm going to call on somebody. Councilmember Van Grack, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I move to adopt the ordinance at attachment 1 of the staff report to amend chapter 10.5 of the Rockville City Code entitled Forest and Tree Preservation Ordinance.
This is the amended one that we
with-
introduced? With
yeah,
the amendment?
with
we just-
amendments.
Okay, with amendments. Okay. Is that understood? Fair enough. Okay, so the amendments include the summary to mayor and council and the amended version body of amendments that you have introduced to us today. Clear? All right. Do we have a second? Councilmember Jackson, seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Excellent. Do we have any nays?
Nay.
Okay, we have one nay by Councilman Valeri, and the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Okay, we now have the mock agenda. We reviewed that this morning. Does anyone have any changes or comments that you want to raise now? Okay, we'll now move to old new business. Mr. City Manager, I have one thing. We talked about the street trees and trying to get more biodiversity. What do you think is the best way for us to follow up on that? We've seen some comments from Reforest Rockville in our community. We've said it a couple times in a dais. What do you think is the best way for us to get that incorporated?
I'd recommend you just ask us for a staff report, an update on where we are with that. I can ask staff's opinion whether we think that needs to be updated and provide that to you, and then you could all decide whether or not to take this up as an action item or not, if that's okay.
Thank you. I think that will be helpful. Councilmember Valeri.
That would be helpful. I know that this is not the first time that the issue has been raised from the dais. Given that there will be pretty substantial definitions included in the updated FCM, I believe that in order to keep these things complementary, we're going to have to revisit, because the last time I think it was revisited was early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Might be along the same times as the last FCM.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anyone, are you guys okay with just doing this via staff report? Thumbs up? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, anything else under old new business? We are ahead of schedule. I will just say thank you to everyone. Last thing is I know Mr. Mihalik is watching very closely the changes and opportunities for us to weigh in on MCPS and what's going on with Turnbrook and Wooten and the operating budget. So we look forward to being able to represent Rockville in that regard. Thank you. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn? Councilmember Valeri, do we have a second? Councilmember Jackson seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Good evening, Rockville.